They said the girl played the violin just to be a joke, but when she raised the bow and started playing, all voices immediately fell silent. Every breath seemed to freeze. In that moment, the mocking laughter vanished, replaced by a stunned silence they couldn't hide. In a hidden corner of Toledo, where old apartment buildings stood packed together in narrow alleys, Nia Forrester grew up with her mother and younger brother in a small apartment on the third floor of a building that had long been worn by time. To Nia, that damp, aging apartment was the only world she knew, a place that sheltered dreams but also concealed the wounds she never let anyone see. Since she was little, Nia had always been a quiet girl, rarely letting others hear her voice. At school, she always chose a seat in the back of the class, next to a small window overlooking the schoolyard, far from the eyes of teachers, classmates, and the carefree, yet unintentional, laughter. Her curly hair was tied neatly at the back, and her deep black eyes were always cast down to the ground. Nia tried her best to remain as invisible as possible, but there was one thing she always kept close to her, and that was the old violin, with long scratches worn by time, carefully stored in a box that had frayed edges. That violin had once belonged to her grandfather, the only person who had ever truly understood her before he passed away when she was 9. Her grandfather used to tell Nia that music was the language of the heart, the voice of things people couldn't dare to say aloud. Since her grandfather's death, the violin became her constant companion. After each stressful day at school, Nia would return home, lock the door to her room, and lose herself in her own world. She had no close friends, no cheerful conversations in the school hallways. To Nia, her best friend, the one who listened and understood her, was the old violin and the aching sounds she created every day. She spent hours practicing with intense passion, sometimes her fingers bleeding from the tight strings. But Nia never gave up. During those times, she thought of her mother, the woman who worked tirelessly as a janitor every night, and of her younger brother's innocent, curious eyes, waiting for something better in the future. At 13, the world around Nia was filled with whispered ridicule, condescending looks from strangers who never truly knew her. But she didn't care, because she knew she had something no one could see. A quiet yet powerful voice, waiting for the day it would be heard. It was from this moment, amid the sounds of the violin, that the story of Nia Forrester began. But Nia's small world was about to change, for not far from the old neighborhood where she lived, a grand stage was being set up under the sparkling lights, ready to become the center of attention for the entire city. The prestigious talent search program, Young Talent Star, was being held for the first time in Toledo, quickly attracting the attention of a large audience and young contestants from all over the country. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, the big dream of countless teenagers, but it was also a place where fear and pressure radiated strongly, causing many to falter right from the starting line. The intensity of the competition came not only from its large scale, but also from the prominent figures sitting on the judging panel. Leading the panel was Mark Reynolds, one of the most powerful music producers, known for his sharp and coldly ruthless comments. Reynolds had once stated that he would never tolerate weakness on stage, and to him success was the only thing worthy of respect. This had made him both a hero and a villain in the eyes of the public, drawing admiration mixed with fear from millions of young hearts passionate about art. Sitting next to Reynolds was Emma Hudson, a music legend who had dominated the charts for 2 decades. She was a powerful woman that any young artist would dream of receiving recognition from. But behind that sweet voice was a strict, sometimes merciless personality. Emma was known for setting standards so high that they were almost extreme, not hesitating to eliminate contestants for even the smallest mistakes. For her, the stage was not for the insecure, and it was certainly not for those who could not withstand the pressure from the bright stage lights. In contrast to these two powerful figures was Sophia Bennett, a renowned violinist known for her deep and emotional performance style. Sophia was not only loved for her rare musical talent, but also for her kind heart, always willing to embrace and help young, undiscovered talents. Sophia's compassion and depth created a delicate balance on the judging panel, making her the only ray of hope contestants sought when facing the pressure from Reynolds and Emma. The show, which had just aired its first few episodes, quickly garnered attention due to the blunt and harsh critiques from Reynolds and Emma. A series of talented contestants, confidently stepping onto the stage, were knocked down by biting, bitter comments. Many cried in front of the cameras, leaving the stage with shattered dreams, while Reynolds and Emma remained cold and indifferent. The audience loved these dramatic moments, but also silently feared who would be the next victim. News about the show spread quickly, from the wealthiest neighborhoods to the cramped, poor apartments like the one where Nia lived. The show became the talk of school hallways, cafes, and even the small kitchens of many families. As for Nia, although she kept her distance from the outside world, she couldn't avoid the attention surrounding the competition. She heard her mother and neighbors gossiping about the controversial episodes, Reynolds' harsh comments, and Emma Hudson's authoritative discomfort. But she never imagined that she would have anything to do with that flashy and intimidating competition. Little did Nia know that one day soon, the spotlight would unknowingly fall on her, pulling her quiet life and her old violin into the harsh but opportunity-filled whirlwind of fate. The blinding lights from the stage of the Young Talent Star competition continuously shone down, making the crowded rows of seats below appear hazy and flickering in Nia Forrester's eyes. She sat silently in a corner, clutching the old violin tightly to her chest, like a tiny lifeline in the vast ocean of unfamiliar faces. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, trying to avoid the scrutinizing, curious gazes of the crowd around her. Nia had never felt comfortable in crowds, and she had never gotten used to the looks of pity mixed with mockery. Miles, her 6-year-old younger brother, kept holding her hand tightly, his big, round eyes shining with excitement. Miles had been fascinated by the show for a long time, and he could name every member of the judging panel, but he especially adored the singer Emma Hudson. He kept whispering in his sister's ear about how famous Emma was and how unique her voice was. Nia merely nodded quietly, offering a weak smile, though deep down she felt anxious. A suffocating feeling she couldn't describe. On stage, Mark Reynolds and Emma Hudson were intently watching the performances, occasionally interrupting the contestants with cold comments. Reynolds' eyes were sharp and indifferent, rarely showing any sympathy for anyone. In his eyes, the music industry was a battlefield, and those who were weak or lacked resolve did not deserve to stand under the spotlight. Emma Hudson, however, was slightly different. Her voice was soft but sharp, and she could make contestants cry with just a few words of critique. Behind her beauty and fame, she had witnessed too many failures in the music industry, which had hardened her heart. To Emma, sympathy was sometimes a form of cruelty for those who nurtured false hopes. When the show took a brief pause for the production team to rearrange the stage, Mark Reynolds stood up from the judges' table to exchange a few words with the director. Upon returning, his gaze inadvertently fell on a small girl sitting quietly in the back corner, holding her old violin. Mark frowned slightly, then immediately smirked, showing a hint of amusement. He gently nudged Emma's arm. "Look over there. Do you think that little girl with the violin is dreaming of becoming a star? Isn't that adorable?" Emma tilted her head and followed Reynolds' gaze, her lips curling into an inscrutable smile as she replied in a lightly mocking tone, "Maybe we've just discovered a forgotten genius, or maybe she's just a little girl who wandered in here by mistake." The half-joking, half-serious conversation between the two famous judges quickly spread. The backstage crew turned to look at Naya, their expression shifting from curiosity to pity. Naya could clearly feel the attention focused on her. Cold sweat trickled down her forehead as her heart raced faster than ever. Sophia Bennett, who had maintained a calm demeanor throughout the casting, seemed to notice the unusual behavior of her colleagues. She leaned toward Reynolds and whispered gently but clearly, "Don't put the girl in an uncomfortable position, Mark. This isn't the way we should handle things." But Reynolds merely shrugged and smiled faintly. "Relax, Sophia. I just want to test her courage a little." He then stood up and walked toward Nia. Emma followed quietly behind, her cold expression revealing a hint of eager anticipation. "Little girl," Reynolds said in a commanding voice, "you've been holding that violin since the beginning. Why don't you try coming up on stage and show us your talent? This could be your chance." Reynolds' voice echoed, causing the room to fall silent instantly, all eyes turning toward the small girl sitting quietly. A few people whispered and giggled, thinking this must be a joke. Emma Hudson, with her usual cold expression, added gently, "Come on, little girl. Go up on stage and show everyone what you can really do with that violin." The small giggles spread throughout the room. Nia's heart seemed to tighten, and her hand gripping the violin began to shake uncontrollably. She wanted to refuse, wanted to run as fast as she could out of the room, but her feet felt as though they were glued to the floor, unable to move even an inch. Miles, with his innocent and carefree eyes, gently tugged at his sister's sleeve. "Nia, are they talking about you? They're asking you to go on stage." Miles' innocent voice only made Nia's heart ache more. She looked deep into her little brother's eyes, seeing the bright spark of hope in them. She couldn't disappoint Miles no matter the circumstances. Taking a deep breath, Nia gathered all the courage she could muster and stood up, though her legs trembled uncontrollably. She lifted her head, looked directly at Reynolds and Emma, and softly replied in a surprisingly firm voice, "I'll go on stage." The room immediately fell silent, shock written all over Reynolds and Emma's faces. Sophia Bennett watched closely, a small warm smile tugging at the corners of her lips, a silent gesture of encouragement. Nia took slow, steady steps toward the stage. In that moment, she knew her life was about to change forever. Though she had never prepared for this, her heart refused to let her turn back now. Each step Nia took toward the stage felt like entering a foreign world full of pressure. The faint giggles slowly faded away, then fell silent, replaced by an air of anticipation mixed with curiosity from everyone in the audience. Her legs shook with each step, and her heart seemed ready to leap out of her chest, but Nia forced herself to continue moving forward. She could clearly feel the prying eyes of the audience and the judges, especially the mocking smile of Reynolds and the cold gaze of Emma Hudson. The stage before her was overwhelmingly vast, entirely different from the small room where she usually practiced every day. The stage lights were blindingly bright, as though trying to pierce through her small body, making her feel as if she were completely naked and vulnerable under the gaze of hundreds of eyes. She stood in the center of the stage, looking down at the audience, struggling to control her breath, which had become fast and shaky. Sophia Bennett gave a gentle smile of encouragement from the judges' table, but it seemed that this soft gaze was not strong enough to dissipate the enormous pressure weighing down on Nia's small shoulders. Emma Hudson sat with her arms crossed, observing her with a look of skepticism, while Reynolds rested his chin in his hand, his gaze seeming to expect more of an entertaining performance than a display of true talent. Nia slowly placed the violin case down, her trembling hands fumbling with the case latch, feeling as if she had completely lost control of her body. She gasped for air and finally managed to pull out the old violin. A whisper began to rise throughout the auditorium as people noticed the worn, warped appearance of the violin. Some began to chuckle lightly, making Nia feel an even sharper sting. She placed the violin on her shoulder, slowly lifted the bow, and tried to focus on the piece she had practiced hundreds of times. But now, her concentration was fragile, shattered by the cutting stares from the audience. The first note came out weakly, trembling like the person she was at that moment, and then quickly slipped out of control. The bow slid across the strings, producing a harsh, screeching sound that echoed throughout the auditorium. Laughter erupted mercilessly from the audience. Reynolds furrowed his brow, and Emma shook her head slightly, a cold smile briefly flickering on her lips. A wave of shame and hurt flooded Nia's small body. She tried again, but the pressure was too great, and her hands were trembling too much to produce a decent sound. The mocking laughter grew louder, clearer. Nia's vision blurred with tears, and she was completely lost on the vast stage, the lights and laughter blending together, surrounding her like an inescapable nightmare. Mark Reynolds couldn't hide his irritation and coldly interrupted, "All right, kid, you've shown us enough." Maybe music isn't for everyone. Emma Hudson nodded in agreement, adding in a mockingly soft tone into the microphone, "And that violin, maybe it belongs in a museum?" Laughter erupted from the audience once more, as if that were the funniest thing they had ever heard. Nia stood still, tears streaming down her cheeks, her throat tight with emotion. She couldn't bear it any longer. Without a word, she grabbed the violin and ran off the stage, leaving behind the sounds of laughter still ringing in her ears. Sophia Bennett jumped up from her seat, her eyes filled with concern, as she watched Nia's small figure disappear backstage, but it was already too late. The girl could no longer hear anything. Nia ran quickly down the hallway, trying to avoid the curious and pitying gazes of the backstage staff. She only stopped when she found a small hidden corner behind the building, out of sight of the lights and completely empty. Nia sank to the floor, burying her face in her hands, and broke down, crying uncontrollably. Tears of pain flowed endlessly, as if they were trying to wash away all the hurt she had just endured. But the pain didn't stop there. Just a few hours after Nia returned home, videos of her failed performance spread widely across social media. Malicious comments and cruel jabs appeared in droves, forcing her to face an even greater pain. People gave her mocking nicknames, calling her a violin disaster or the failed dreamer. Each comment felt like a knife cutting deep into her self-esteem and the musical dreams she had once cherished. Nia curled up in her dark, small room, the violin lying silently beside her, like a quiet friend sharing her pain. She couldn't stop crying, couldn't sleep. Outside her room, her mother gently knocked on the door, but Nia didn't respond. She just wanted to shrink into the darkness, to vanish, to forget everything that had just happened. And in that moment, deep in her wounded heart, Nia thought that perhaps that dream of music would never belong to her. The stage lights, which had seemed so bright, were not meant for someone like her. The following days passed for Nia like a hazy and heavy fog. Her already small world became even more cramped and dark, as the heartless criticisms on social media showed no sign of stopping. In her small room, every time she closed her eyes, Nia could hear the cold laughter of Reynolds and the spiteful words of Emma Hudson, their voices echoing clearly, causing sharp pain. She curled up on her bed, her eyes fixed on the old ceiling, as if there was no strength or hope left to get up. Nia's mother was deeply worried. She still knocked on the door every night, gently calling her daughter's name, hoping to find a way to soothe the ache in her little heart. But all she received in return was the cold silence from inside the room. Miles, her younger brother, was no longer cheerful either. He sat quietly in front of his sister's door, clutching an old toy, his once innocent eyes now reflecting a sadness that was hard to describe. But while the whole world seemed to turn its back on Naya, somewhere out there was still one person who was quietly watching over her, and had not forgotten the image of the little girl with the old violin. That person was Sophia Bennett. Sophia could not forget the deeply hurt look in Nia's eyes when she left the stage in tears. A deep sense of regret stirred within her. She knew well the cruelty of the entertainment world and the harshness of every word spoken by Mark Reynolds and Emma Hudson. But what concerned Sophia even more was that she saw something no one else did. A small but powerful spark hidden deep within the sad eyes of that girl. A few days after that painful event, Sophia decided to search for Naya. She didn't want the girl to suffer alone. Through her connections, Sophia quickly got the address where Naya and her family lived. One rainy afternoon, as light drizzle fell over the city of Toledo, Sophia Bennett, the famous violinist, stood in front of the Forrester family's small, old apartment and gently raised her hand to knock on the door. The door creaked open, and Naya's mother appeared, surprised to see a woman of elegance, dressed simply but tastefully, standing at her doorstep. Sophia politely introduced herself, her voice gentle and warm, like the first rays of spring, immediately dispelling any initial shyness or hesitation. "I'm Sophia Bennett. I'm here for Nia," she said with a gentle smile. Nia's mother stood still for a moment, then quickly invited Sophia in, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you for coming. I'm so worried about her. She hasn't left her room since that day." Sophia nodded gently, her eyes full of sympathy. She quietly moved toward the closed door of the small room and knocked softly. "Nia, it's Sophia Bennett. I'd like to talk to you for a moment, if that's okay." There was no reply, but Sophia patiently waited. She knew that sometimes the greatest pain caused people to fall completely silent, and to reach a wounded heart, she had to be gentle. After a long silence, the door slowly opened, revealing Naya's pale, small face. Sophia looked directly into her eyes and smiled softly. "May I come in?" Nia remained silent, but she stepped aside to let Sophia into the room. Sophia entered the small room and looked around. On the small bed lay the old violin, quietly resting, as though it too was sharing in the sadness with its young owner. Sophia gently sat down next to the violin and said softly, "You know, I used to be like you. I too was rejected and looked down on many times before becoming the artist I am today. Sometimes it's these pains that make us stronger, Nia." Nia sat silently opposite her, her eyes still cast down. Her soft, choked voice broke the silence. "But I failed. I disappointed my mom, disappointed my little brother." Sophia gently shook her head and took the trembling hand of the girl. "You haven't failed, Nia. A performance doesn't define who you are. I heard just a few brief seconds of your violin playing that day, and I know you have something special, something more than all the others on that stage. You just haven't figured out how to express it yet." Nia lifted her eyes to look at Sophia, tears welling up once again. For the first time in days of enduring, she felt understood, heard. "I'm scared. I can't take it anymore." Sophia gently stroked Nia's hair, her voice warm and comforting. "You don't have to endure it alone anymore. If you allow me, I will help you find your music again. I believe you deserve to be heard, to be respected." For the first time, a faint glimmer of hope shone in Nia's eyes, though it was still mixed with worry. do you really think I can do it?" Sophia nodded firmly. "Not only can you do it, but you'll make those who laughed at you realize they were wrong. But the most important thing is not proving it to them, but proving it to yourself." Sophia's words were like a beam of light, cutting through the dark clouds that had covered Nia's heart. Nia nodded softly, for the first time feeling that she was not completely alone in this harsh world. Sophia gently hugged the girl, whispering tenderly, "I'll be here, by your side, until you are strong enough to shine on your own." And from that moment, a new chapter began to unfold, not just for Nia, but also for Sophia Bennett. Two hearts, two generations, now connected by music, belief, and courage, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Since the moment Sophia Bennett gently closed the door of Nia's small room that fateful afternoon, a new chapter filled with challenges and hope had opened in the young girl's life. Sophia's gaze that day, warm, sincere, yet strangely determined, ignited a small but powerful flame in Nia's heart, something she thought she had lost forever when she walked off the stage in tears. From that day on, every afternoon after school, Sophia would come to the Forrester family's tiny apartment to practice with Nia. The atmosphere in the small room was no longer filled with quiet sadness, but gradually became filled with the rising and falling sounds of the violin, sometimes weak, sometimes fierce, coming from the old instrument. Sophia not only helped Nia improve her technique, but also gently guided her through deep psychological barriers. She often reminded Nia that truly valuable music wasn't about perfect notes, but about the genuine emotions an artist poured into each melody. But the journey of regaining confidence was never easy for Nia. The painful memories from the past were still deeply etched in her mind. Each time she made a small mistake during practice, Nia would immediately tense up, her hands shaking, and tears would well up in her eyes. The mocking words from Mark Reynolds and Emma Hudson that day still haunted her like ghosts, constantly taunting her whenever she tried to push her limits. Sophia felt this keenly and understood that in order to truly help Nia, she had to be more patient than ever before. Sophia often sat beside her, gently reassuring her with soft but firm words. "Nia, music can't be judged by just one performance. Let your heart guide the violin. Play for yourself before playing for anyone else." These sincere words slowly seeped into Nia's heart, forming an invisible armor that protected her from the old, haunting fears. She began to spend hours every day practicing, sometimes forgetting to eat or rest. Her small hands, once soft and delicate, now showed the distinct signs of calluses, a testament to the extraordinary effort she had put in. There were nights when the small apartment would sink into a quiet darkness, and her mother would gently knock on the door, worried, asking, "My dear, are you tired? Don't push yourself too hard." Nia would always respond softly with a rare smile, yet full of determination. "I'm fine, Mom. I want to do this. I need to do this." Beside Nia was also Miles, her little brother, who always sat by the door whenever she practiced. Miles's big, innocent eyes would always watch her with admiration. Sometimes he would suddenly exclaim with excitement, "Sis, you played so well today. I believe you'll be as good as Miss Sophia." His innocent, pure words sometimes held more power than the toughest practice sessions. It was an invaluable source of energy that helped Nia find the strength to overcome moments of discouragement and despair. But the journey Nia was on was not without its shadows. Out there, the harsh world continued to turn. Social media would occasionally remind her of the old clip of her failure, and the malicious comments would rise like cold waves, attempting to wash away the fragile self-confidence she was working so hard to rebuild. Sometimes Nia would accidentally read those cruel words, and her heart would sink, filled with doubt about herself. In those dark moments, Sophia was always there, patiently reminding her, "You know, Nia, every great artist has had moments like yours. You can't control what people say about you, but you can always control how you respond to them. Respond with your music, with all the heart and soul you have." Gradually, Nia's extraordinary perseverance led to remarkable progress. The shaky, uncertain notes that once echoed from her violin were now becoming steadier, deeper. Sophia knew that what Nia needed most at this moment was a second chance, a stage where she could show all that she had accumulated over time. One evening, after a long, intense practice, Sophia gently placed her hand on Nia's shoulder and softly said, "I think it's time for you to return to the stage, Nia. Not to prove anything to Reynolds or Emma Hudson, but to prove to yourself that you can overcome any barrier and fear." Nia's gaze was momentarily hesitant, but it was also filled with longing. "Do you think I'm really ready?" Sophia smiled confidently. "You've been ready for a long time, Nia. Now let the whole world hear your sound." Nia nodded slowly. In her eyes, the worry and self-doubt were slowly giving way to a fierce determination. She knew that there would still be many challenges ahead, but this time she was no longer alone. By her side were her mother, Miles, and especially Sophia Bennett, the woman who had appeared like a guardian angel, helping her rediscover a dream she thought was lost. And from that moment on, Nia understood that no matter what happened, she would never give up again. That stage, those lights, would surely be the place for her to shine. Despite the patient support of Sophia Bennett and the wholehearted encouragement from her mother and younger brother, the world outside their small apartment still wouldn't let Nia go. While the girl worked hard every day to overcome her insecurities and wounds, trying to rebuild her confidence from scratch, the relentless waves of media attention showed no sign of stopping. They surged relentlessly, drowning the fragile hopes that had only just begun to bloom. Every morning, the first thing Nia saw was not the gentle sunlight streaming through the small window, but the notifications on her phone with negative messages about her continuing to spread. The video of Nia's failure on the Young Talent Star stage was still being shared at a rapid pace, becoming a topic for netizens to freely discuss and mock. People didn't hesitate to give her cruel nicknames like the Violin Disaster, the Queen of Failure, or even tag her in deeply offensive memes. These sharp, malicious comments kept appearing, so frequently that she couldn't avoid them completely, even though she tried her best to ignore them. But what hurt Nia even more was the attitude of the very people in power who had publicly belittled her on stage that day. In a live interview on national television, when asked about the reason for Nia stepping on stage, Mark Reynolds coldly replied with a distant tone, "We gave the girl a chance, but unfortunately it was a mistake. Some people are born to stand under the spotlight, and others will never belong there. I think Nia has shown everyone she belongs in the second group." Right next to him, Emma Hudson, softly but sharply added, "I agree with Mark. That performance was the clearest example that passion doesn't always equal talent. Honestly, I think the stage isn't for those who dream unrealistic dreams." The words of the two celebrities instantly became a media bomb, exploding and sparking public outrage. Those who had previously been neutral now turned to criticize, seeing Nia as a living example of failure and naivety in the arts. Public opinion on social media grew even fiercer and more unforgiving, with no one caring about the consequences or how deeply a young girl was suffering behind her phone screen. In that small room, Nia once again saw the dream she had worked so hard to build starting to crumble. She buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down endlessly. The whispers of Reynolds and Emma echoed in her head, clear and cold, like sharp knives cutting into the already deep wound. Sophia Bennett quickly realized how serious Naya's situation had become. One afternoon, when she arrived at the small apartment, she found Naya sitting silently by the window, her eyes blankly staring into the distance, the violin lying quietly next to her, forgotten. Sophia gently sat down beside her, softly asking, "What are you thinking about, Nia?" Nia remained silent for a long time, then whispered softly, "Maybe they're right, ma'am. Maybe I really don't belong on stage. I'm just chasing a dream that's not meant for me." Sophia gently took her hand, her voice calm but firm. "Naya, do you know, people like Reynolds and Emma aren't always right. There are many people in this world who love to judge others, but they never truly understand what you've been through. They only see what they want to see." Nia looked up at Sophia, her eyes full of helplessness. "But they are the powerful ones, the ones everyone believes in." Sophia smiled softly and shook her head. "Yes, they have power. But power doesn't equal truth. Power doesn't make them always right, and it can't give them the right to decide your life." Outside, the door to the room gently creaked open, and Nia's mother and Miles stood quietly, silently listening. Her mother gently stepped in, placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, and said softly, "Nia, you've done very well. You're stronger than all the things people are saying about you. Your brother and I are so proud of you, no matter what the world outside says." Miles ran over and hugged his sister tightly, his little face full of concern but also surprising determination. "Sis, don't listen to them. I know you're the best. You'll be back on stage and you'll show them all." The sincere words from her family and Sophia felt like a refreshing stream of water, gently washing away the bitterness piling up in Nia's heart. Even though outside, the cold words from Reynolds and Emma were still sowing sharp thorns, inside this small room, Nia knew she was not alone. Sophia looked directly into the girl's eyes, her voice calm but full of strength. "Let them say whatever they want, Nia. What you need to do is keep moving forward on the path you've chosen. Remember, only you truly know who you are and what you're capable of." Nia looked down at the violin next to her, gently picking it up, as if finding a dear friend she thought she had lost. Her eyes gradually became more determined, though her heart still carried wounds. She now knew more than ever that, no matter how hard the world outside tries to push her down, she could still choose to rise again. Amid the cold and harsh media storm surrounding Nia, the outside world seemed like a strange and frightening place. Yet, amidst the noisy clamor, a sincere and empathetic voice suddenly emerged, like a gentle ray of light shining on the wounded soul of the young girl. That voice belonged to none other than Malik, a young piano prodigy with deep, soulful eyes filled with silent experiences, much like Nia's. Malik was no stranger to the loyal viewers of Young Talent Star. At just 14 years old, he had already become a nationwide sensation, thanks to his innate piano talent. The audience admired Malik not only for his skillful technique, but also for his maturity and depth far beyond his years. However, what few knew was that behind his confident and powerful performances, Malik had also been a victim of criticism and had experienced loneliness and disappointment when the adults around him underestimated his abilities. Because of this, Malik understood better than anyone what Nia was going through. On that day, when her failed performance became a joke on social media, Malik had quietly watched from the sidelines. Unlike many others, he didn't feel joy or curiosity. Instead, he felt a genuine sorrow and understanding. He knew exactly how Nia felt standing on that stage, under the cold gazes and mocking laughter. Not wanting Nia to endure that feeling alone, Malik decided to visit her. One sunny afternoon, after Sophia Bennett had just finished a practice session with Naya, Malik quietly appeared in front of the small Forrester family apartment. He stood at the door, hesitating for a moment before gently knocking on the old wooden door. The door opened, and Nia froze for a moment when she realized the piano prodigy she had once admired was standing right in front of her. Malik smiled gently, his eyes sincere and full of kindness. "Hey, Nia, I'm Malik. You might not have met me, but I know who you are. I'm here because I want to say, I understand what you're going through." Malik's first words immediately touched Nia's heart. She stood there, stunned for a moment, before nodding softly and silently, inviting Malik inside. They sat next to the window, the room bathed in a warm, golden afternoon light, strangely peaceful, in stark contrast to the turmoil outside. Malik continued softly, his voice carrying a depth beyond his age. "I've also stood on stage and felt like the whole world was turning its back on me. People like Reynolds and Emma will never understand us. They only see what they want to see, but that doesn't mean we have to stop." Nia looked at Malik, her eyes brimming with tears. "You don't know. I really don't know if I can step on stage again. I'm scared." Malik smiled gently, filled with sympathy. "I understand. I was once afraid too, but there's one thing I've learned. We can't let people like them decide who we are. I saw the clip of you playing that day, just a few seconds, but I could tell right away that you're someone special. Your music has something real in it, something that people like Reynolds and Emma will never get." Nia looked up at Malik, her voice still trembling, but for the first time in days, a small glimmer of hope shone through. "Do you really think that?" Malik nodded confidently, his eyes gleaming with conviction. "Absolutely. And I have an idea. I think we should prepare a special performance, one that no one has ever seen, to make all those who ever look down on us change their minds." Nia went silent for a moment. She had never thought she could step on stage again, but now Malik was offering her a second chance, and this time she wouldn't have to face it alone. "Do you really think we can do this?" Malik extended his hand to her, his gaze filled with unwavering belief. "I don't just think it. I'm sure we can." From that day on, every afternoon when the last rays of sunlight fell, Malik quietly visited Nia's house to practice. They didn't tell anyone about their special plan, except for Sophia Bennett, who immediately supported the brilliant idea with enthusiasm and great faith. Malik played the piano with a strong heart, while Nia played the violin with deep emotion, and together they gradually blended their music into something unique, different from anything they had ever done before. Throughout this intense practice process, Malik continually encouraged Nia with sincere words. "You know, Naya, the best thing about music is that it lets us express our true selves. Don't be afraid anymore. This time, let the music speak for everything you've kept hidden inside." Malik's words slowly helped Nia step out of the shadow of her past. She no longer thought about the cruel comments, nor did she care about what Reynolds and Emma had said about her. Now, all that remained in her heart was the music, the faith, and the true friendship of Malik. Both knew that the special performance they were secretly preparing could completely change their lives and could provoke unpredictable reactions. But no matter what happened, Nia and Malik were ready to face it, because this time they were not just stepping on stage to prove something to the world, but more importantly, they were doing it to prove to themselves that no one in this world could define who they were except for them. While Nia and Malik continued to quietly practice, preparing for their unprecedented special performance, Outside, the public still couldn't stop talking. It seemed as though the whole world was casting curious and skeptical glances at the girl who had once failed on stage. The pressure from the media, social networks, and especially the increasing attention from the audience was mounting, forcing the young talent star show to make an unprecedented decision: invite Nia Forrester back to perform during the live gala night. This information quickly spread, becoming a fiercely debated topic. Those who had mocked Nia before continued to sneer, claiming it was nothing more than a cheap stunt to garner views for the show. On social media forums, the malicious comments were more frequent than ever. Some people argued that Nia did not deserve to appear on that prestigious stage again, seeing it as an insult to the other talented contestants who were genuinely working hard. Mark Reynolds and Emma Hudson were also caught up in the debate. In a press conference held to promote the special gala night, Mark Reynolds coldly spoke before dozens of cameras and hundreds of reporters. "I don't understand this decision by the organizers. The stage is not a place for someone to redeem their mistakes. We are looking for true talent, not a fairy tale with a happy ending." Emma Hudson, not shy to voice her opinion, spoke with a serious yet calculating expression. Inviting Nia back clearly seems like a decision to grab attention. But I worry whether someone who failed so profoundly before can endure another failure. This is not a game. These statements were like a violent storm, escalating the opposition even further, and the pressure on Nia became overwhelming. Every time she overheard such words, it felt as if she were walking on a thin wire, suspended high above a bottomless pit, where one small mistake would cause her to lose everything. Amid this tension, one evening before the gala, Malik gently placed his hand on Nia's shoulder after they finished their practice session. His gaze was filled with determination and trust. "Don't forget why we're doing this. Reynolds and Emma will never understand us. They're waiting for you to fail again, but we won't let that happen." Nia looked up at Malik. There was still a hint of hesitation in her eyes, but much stronger than before. She nodded slightly, her voice soft but full of resolve. "I know. And this time, I won't let them hurt me again." As the performance day drew near, Nia's mother's anxiety grew. In the small kitchen, her mother gently stroked her daughter's hair, her voice full of concern. "Nia, I know you've tried so hard, but I'm still worried. That stage, is it too soon?" Nia looked at her mother, offering a gentle smile to reassure her, her tone serious. "Don't worry, Mom. I need to do this. I want to prove that I am not a failure like everyone thinks. I'll be fine." Miles stood beside them, his bright eyes full of pride as he looked at his sister. "Hey, remember, I always believe in you. You can do it." Those sincere words of encouragement gave Nia strength and courage. She knew that this time she could not let fear win. She could not let the world's doubts decide her fate again. The night of the gala finally arrived. The grand hall was decorated more magnificently than ever before, with dazzling lights and upbeat music. But backstage, Nia stood silently in the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. She could clearly feel the cold stares of Reynolds and Emma watching her from the judges' table. Malik gently stepped beside her, whispering reassuringly, "Remember, don't let them control your emotions. We just need to focus on the music. Let the music decide everything else." Nia took a deep breath and nodded firmly. She and Malik had spent hours, days, practicing this special performance, a piece of music they had composed themselves, blending Nia's deep, soulful violin with Malik's powerful, emotional piano notes. This piece was not just a performance. It was a true expression of their hearts, the only and most powerful answer to everyone who had doubted them. Sophia Bennett stood behind them, softly placing a hand on Nia's shoulder, her familiar warm voice offering encouragement. "Show them who you really are, Naya. Play as if the whole world is listening, because that's the truth." A program staff member entered the backstage, announcing loudly, "Naya Forrester, Malik Evans, it's time to go on stage." Nia and Malik exchanged a knowing look. They both knew what awaited them out there, a world full of skepticism, cold judges, and curious audience members waiting to see if this would be another disaster. But in that moment, Naya made her decision. No matter what, this time, she would step onto the stage, not to beg for another chance, but to seize it with all the courage and belief she had. The stage lights blazed brightly. The applause and murmurs from the audience crashed around her like a tidal wave, trying to swallow her whole. But Nia walked steadily, head held high, violin firmly in hand, ready to face the greatest challenge of her life once more. As the stage lights blazed to life, illuminating every corner of the vast auditorium, Naya felt as if all movement around her suddenly slowed. The applause from thousands of spectators seemed distant, echoing as though from another world. But quickly, the suffocating silence enveloped the entire room as all eyes full of doubt and curiosity turned towards her, the girl who had once failed miserably on this very stage. Naya took slow steps forward, her hands trembling lightly, her palms cold as they gripped the worn violin tightly. Each step felt like crossing over hundreds of mocking words, thousands of skeptical gazes from the audience. But this time, unlike before, she did not lower her head or look at the ground. Her eyes were fixed ahead, determined and stronger than ever before. When she stood in the center of the stage, every sound in the room seemed to vanish, leaving only the rapid, powerful beat of her heart in her chest. Her gaze accidentally met the judge's row, where Mark Reynolds and Emma Hudson were watching her intently with their familiar cold eyes. Reynolds leaned back slightly in his chair, arms crossed over his chest, his face filled with clear skepticism. Emma Hudson gently tapped her fingers on the judging table, her lips curling into a half-smile that seemed to challenge her, as though waiting for the girl to fail once again. But amid those sharp, cold stares, Naya caught the warm, encouraging gaze of Sophia Bennett. The violinist she admired sat in the judge's row, her eyes full of trust, her head giving a slight nod as if to say, "I believe you can do it." On the left side of the stage, Malik was already seated at the piano, his eyes bright and calm as he looked towards her, giving a quiet nod of silent encouragement. It was his powerful gaze that gave Nia the courage to take a deep breath and prepare for the most important moment of her life. The audience began to whisper softly, many showing clear signs of doubt, even mocking her second appearance. But Naya decided not to let these external sounds distract her. In that moment, all that remained was the music, the memories of hard practice with Sophia, with Malik, and the unconditional love from her mother and little brother. Slowly, Naya raised the violin to her shoulder, gently placing the bow on the strings. Once again, the familiar feeling of fear and pressure surged through her. The images of her past failure flashed vividly in her mind, the mocking sounds and scornful looks echoing in her thoughts. But this time, instead of letting them control her, Naya chose to face the fear head-on. She reminded herself that this was her moment to prove she was no longer the trembling, failed girl she once was. The music began with a gentle, deep note from Malik's piano. The sound of the keys was soft, warm, like a guiding voice of trust, opening the way for Nia's music. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the deepest emotions within her surface, no longer shy or afraid. The first note of the violin emerged, delicate and refined, blending perfectly with Malik's piano. This music was not about perfect sound or technical precision, but rather the truest emotions she wanted to share with the world. Each note told a story of the arduous journey, of silent tears falling in the long nights, and of the persistence that never gave up in the dark. At first, the skeptical gazes below did not change. Reynolds remained still. Emma continued to observe every small movement she made, waiting for the slightest mistake to confirm that Naya did not belong on that stage. But as time passed, the sound of the violin grew stronger and more profound. Each note from Nia's small hands seemed to carry a strange power, awakening deep emotions in the listeners. The atmosphere in the room slowly shifted, from doubtful silence to complete stillness. Every eye now focused entirely on the small girl standing in the center of the stage with her old violin. Both Reynolds and Emma instinctively sat up straight, the indifference they had shown before fading away, replaced by an unmistakable sense of surprise. The piece Nia and Malik were playing was not just a performance. It was a story, a bold declaration of resilience and courage. Things Reynolds and Emma never imagined could come from a girl they once mocked. Nia opened her eyes and looked directly at the auditorium, now fully captivated by her and Malik's music. She realized she had done what seemed impossible. She had conquered herself, overcome fear and doubt, and stood firm on this vast stage, not through perfection, but through honesty and courage. In that moment, she knew she was no longer the failed girl from before. She had become herself, a true artist ready to face any challenge life placed before her. The final moment of the lingering silence filled with anticipation enveloped the stage. Nia gently relaxed her body, letting all the pressure and doubts dissolve into the air. Her gaze briefly flicked to Malik, who sat calmly before the piano, his hands poised and ready on the keys. A subtle nod from Malik served as a discreet signal, letting Nia know that now was the time to prove her true musical self, a piece she and Malik had quietly woven together through their own wounds, tears, and hopes. The violin's bow gently pulled the first notes from the strings, the sound of the violin ringing out, pure and soft, like a whisper recounting the sweetest memories from her childhood. The first notes were light and simple, like a cool breeze brushing by, creating an emotional atmosphere that made the entire audience sink deeply into an unusual focus. After a few seconds of stillness, Malik joined the music with warm and deep piano tones. His sound was like pure raindrops falling into the listener's soul, gently blending with Nia's violin, creating a vivid and emotional musical picture. This piece was unlike anything the audience had heard before on the Young Talent Star stage, as it carried both the profound classicism of orchestral music and the free nostalgic breath of blues. As Nia began to pick up the pace, the notes became stronger and more decisive. The violin sound grew more intense, each note vibrating with clarity as though releasing all the pent-up emotions. In every movement of her hands, one could not only see the technical mastery, but also feel the pain, the wounds, and the strong determination to overcome all the ridicule and doubt from the past. The audience in the hall began to be astonished. The skeptical, mocking looks from earlier now turned into surprise, then into admiration, with astonished expressions all around. The murmurs died down and then vanished entirely, as everyone was completely captivated by the sounds created by this small girl. In each heart, something different began to stir, a truth so powerful it was almost suffocating. On the judges' row, Mark Reynolds involuntarily sat up straighter. The cold, arrogant expression that had been on his face earlier completely disappeared, replaced by an intense, surprised focus. He had never thought the girl he had mocked could stand on this stage and produce such powerful and profound sounds. Sitting next to him, Emma Hudson also couldn't hide her surprise. She subtly covered her mouth with her hand, her gaze fixed intently on every movement of Nia, as if unable to believe what she was witnessing. Sophia Bennett, sitting beside them, had a look of deep emotion and pride in her eyes. This was the moment she had always believed in and waited for. The moment Nia proved her true strength to the world, and more importantly, to herself. Nia was now fully immersed in the world of music she had created. Her composition was not only a delicate fusion of classical technique and the fierce freedom of blues, but it was also her life story, a story of shattered dreams, deep pain, but also a testament to the inner strength within her soul. The music was like a powerful wave, the layers of sound rising and then gently settling, pulling every listener's heart to beat in unison with the overwhelming emotion. Malik continued to accompany Nia, his fingers swiftly moving across the piano keys, his eyes completely focused on her emotions to create perfect harmony. Two young hearts, both deeply hurt by the same cold world, now connected through music, forming a strength that left everyone witnessing it in awe and deep emotion. As Nia reached the final climactic notes, all the emotions seemed to explode in that moment. She pulled the violin's strings forcefully, the sound rising sharply, powerfully, like a scream of release and freedom. It was the moment she completely broke free from the shadows of her past, rising above all the judgments, mockery, and doubt. Her eyes shone brightly, full of confidence, no longer trembling. The final note of the piece faded softly, and the hall was left in absolute silence for a few seconds. No one dared to break the powerful emotion in the air. Reynolds, Emma, and Sophia all sat frozen, as if time had stopped, unable to believe what had just happened before their eyes. Then, from somewhere behind the hall, a small clap sounded, followed by a second, a third, until the entire audience stood and clapped loudly, cheers and emotional gazes directed at the small girl standing on stage. In that moment, Nia looked down at the judges' row, her eyes meeting Reynolds and Emma's. The two powerful judges could no longer hide their astonishment and shame. This was the moment they realized they were wrong, profoundly wrong. As for Nia, amidst the thunderous applause and cheers, she simply smiled gently, her heart filled with happiness and relief. She had won, not just this big stage, but more importantly, she had won over herself. The applause echoed loudly and endlessly in the auditorium, seemingly without end, but the most special moment was not the applause itself, but the brief moment of silence that preceded it, a moment of overwhelming stillness, when every gaze was fixed on the stage, completely captivated by the final notes played on Nia's violin. Nia stood motionless in the spotlight, her hands still trembling slightly after the emotional performance. She could feel her heart pounding, the thunderous applause of the audience crashing over her like sound waves enveloping her small frame. But the most important thing to Nia in that moment was not the crowd's adulation, but the gaze of those who had once deeply hurt her. Two powerful judges, Mark Reynolds and Emma Hudson. In the judges' row, Reynolds sat motionless, his eyes wide open, utterly stunned by what had just transpired. His face, usually cold and full of arrogant confidence, now looked pale and disoriented. It was Reynolds, who had once firmly asserted that Nia had no talent whatsoever, now forced to sit in silence and witness a performance that surpassed all of his wildest expectations. Beside him, Emma Hudson could not hide her shock. The strong, sharp woman, who always claimed to never make a mistake when it came to judging talent, now sat quietly, her gaze betraying a hint of confusion and embarrassment. The confident smirk she often wore had completely vanished, replaced by a quiet, reflective look filled with regret, as she realized she had hastily and ruthlessly made hurtful comments about this talented young girl. Sophia Bennett gently placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, a gesture of comfort but also with deep meaning. Without a single word, Sophia made Emma understand that they had just witnessed not just a performance but a testament to the power of perseverance and courage. Emma nodded faintly, her eyes shining with an unprecedented remorse. Meanwhile, Reynolds remained silent, trying to maintain his usual cold expression, but his eyes betrayed the inner turmoil he was experiencing. He had once believed that his experience and position in the music world were absolute, enough for him to confidently judge others with harshness and clarity. But now, this powerful man realized he too could make severe mistakes, and the most shameful thing of all was that he had allowed himself to underestimate a true talent simply because of his own subjective biases. The atmosphere in the auditorium remained vibrant, but a clear transformation had taken place. The audience, who had once doubted and even mocked Naya, now stood up in unison, applauding, their eyes filled with genuine emotion and admiration. The harsh comments from before were now replaced by cheers of encouragement, faces full of emotion, and many even shedding tears as the performance had touched the very core of their hearts. On the side of the stage, Malik stepped away from the piano and walked over to stand beside Nia, offering a gentle, proud, and warm smile. His eyes sparkled, as if to tell her that they had done it. They had overcome all doubts and mockery, and now they stood here as true artists, more confident and stronger than ever. Finally, Reynolds slowly stood up, moved towards the microphone in front of him, his voice slightly choked, no longer as sharp as usual. I think I made a serious mistake. I underestimated you, Nia. I was wrong, and I truly want to apologize. Your performance just now was one of the most incredible things I have ever witnessed." The auditorium erupted into even louder applause. This was not just an apology from the most notoriously tough judge, but also an official recognition that Naya had far exceeded all expectations and initial prejudices. Emma Hudson also stood up right after, her voice softer and more sincere than ever. "Naya, I want to tell you that you didn't just perform a piece of music. You taught me an important lesson. I used to think I was always right, but today you made me realize that music is truly never limited by anyone's subjective biases. Thank you." Nia stood silently, tears gently falling from her eyes. For the first time in her life, she heard such heartfelt words from those who had once hurt her. She could clearly feel the warmth and sincerity in every word, and she knew that, at last, she had truly stepped out of the shadows of her past to stand proudly in the light of today. Down below the stage, her mother and Miles were also standing, clapping continuously, their eyes shining with pride. For them, this moment was the clearest proof of Nia's strength and courage. Sophia Bennett also stood up, nodding gently, offering a soft, tender smile, as if to confirm that the girl she had once believed in had now become a true artist. In that moment, amidst the ceaseless applause, the deep emotions from the audience, and the genuine remorse from Reynolds and Emma, Naya realized that she had not only changed how others viewed her, but she had also changed how they saw true talent and courage. And more than anything, she knew that she had officially regained the most precious thing in her life: her belief in herself. The emotion in the auditorium had not yet settled. When outside, social media began to rapidly spread Naya's performance as an unprecedented phenomenon. The video capturing every moment of her playing the old violin with intense emotion, paired with Malik's deep piano sound, was immediately shared across forums, quickly garnering millions of views and countless positive comments in just a few short hours. Those who had once mocked and doubted Naya now quietly retracted their words, replacing them with genuine admiration and belated apologies. But what truly captured the public's attention was not just the remarkable performance itself, but the story behind it, the deep scars Naya had endured from the most powerful figures in the competition, Mark Reynolds and Emma Hudson. The pressure from public opinion grew stronger by the minute, with each comment and article sharply criticizing the two judges. The public relentlessly questioned their ethical responsibility and lack of fairness, causing Reynolds and Emma's images to quickly deteriorate in the eyes of the audience. In particular, social media continuously demanded that these famous judges publicly apologize to Naya, not only for their failure in evaluating her talent, but also for the heavy emotional damage they had caused to a young girl. In a situation where silence was no longer an option, the program organizers decided to hold an official press conference. It was not just a regular press conference, but an opportunity for Reynolds and Emma to correct the harm they had caused, and at the same time, save their public image and reputation. The press conference took place in an atmosphere of unprecedented tension. Reynolds and Emma entered the room, facing dozens of cameras and microphones. Contrary to their usual cold, arrogant expressions, both now showed rare seriousness and deep reflection. Their eyes were filled with confusion and regret, as if they had just realized the serious mistakes they had made. Mark Reynolds approached the microphone, taking a deep breath before speaking with clear sincerity and emotion. "Today, I stand here not as a powerful judge or a famous music producer, but as someone who has made a grave mistake. I want to offer my sincerest apologies to Naya Forrester and her family. I was too hasty, too arrogant, thinking that my experience was always right, and it was that very attitude that deeply hurt a true talent. I sincerely apologize for my disrespectful words and actions." He paused for a moment, as if allowing himself to fully grasp the weight of his words, before continuing in a calm yet emotional tone. "I've learned a valuable lesson, that we should never judge others too quickly or harshly, especially when we don't truly understand the journey they've been through. I hope that the sincerity in this apology can help alleviate some of the pain I've caused Naya." Emma Hudson, standing beside Reynolds, also stepped forward, her gaze full of sincerity and regret. She spoke gently, her voice trembling as if on the verge of tears. "I also want to apologize to Nia. I was wrong to hastily judge her based on a single mistake. As an experienced artist, I should have known better than anyone that the path of art is never easy, especially for a young girl struggling to overcome pressure and prejudice. I feel deeply ashamed that I was a part of making her almost lose faith in herself." Emma paused for a moment, looking directly into the television cameras as if speaking directly to Nia and her family. "I apologize for not recognizing your true talent sooner. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to understand that sometimes it is sincerity and courage that make a great artist. I hope you can forgive me and continue on your own strong path in music." The press room fell into a poignant silence after these rare, heartfelt apologies from the two powerful judges. Journalists began asking deeper questions, no longer focused on judging them, but rather expressing genuine concern about the lessons both Reynolds and Emma had learned from Nia's story. Outside, public reactions started to shift positively. Although many still felt dissatisfied with Reynolds and Emma's previous actions, the majority were satisfied with their sincerity and serious attitude in acknowledging and correcting their mistakes. In the small Forrester family apartment, Naya and her mother, along with Miles, intently watched the press conference on a small screen. Naya did not say much. She simply listened in silence to the sincere apologies from Reynolds and Emma. Her eyes flickered with a hint of emotion, but also with a sense of calm. For her, the apology was not only a late recognition from those who had once hurt her, but also a final release from the darkness of the past. Her mother gently placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered softly, "You did it, Nia. They've finally recognized your true worth." Nia smiled faintly, her heart now completely at peace. She knew the journey ahead would still be long, but now, with this recognition and sincere apology, she could confidently move forward, leaving behind the pain and shame of the past. In the end, she had forgiven, not just Reynolds and Emma, but also herself. When the heartfelt apologies from Reynolds and Emma were broadcasted widely across the media, public sentiment gradually shifted from anger to understanding and empathy. People realized that even the most powerful and successful individuals can make mistakes, and what truly matters is the ability to acknowledge and correct those mistakes. However, amidst the spotlight, Nia remained calm and composed. She did not seize the opportunity to criticize or take revenge on those who had hurt her. Instead, she chose to respond with quiet dignity, a silence that reflected her maturity and inner strength, more powerful than any words could express. One peaceful afternoon, in front of the familiar small apartment of the Forrester family, a group of reporters appeared. They carried cameras, microphones, and questions about how Nia would react to the public apologies from Reynolds and Emma. Nia, with a demeanor that was both admirable and serene, stepped forward to face the group of reporters. Her gaze was clear, steady, and full of self-respect. A reporter approached her cautiously and asked, "Nia, the apologies from Reynolds and Emma have been heard by the entire country. How do you feel about it, and have you truly forgiven them?" Nia paused for a moment before softly smiling and responding with a gentle yet firm voice. "I no longer feel angry or bitter. Their apology was sincere, and I appreciate that. But what matters most to me is not that they apologized, but that they, and everyone else, finally listened to what I had to say." Nia stopped and looked directly into the camera lens, her gaze deep and full of emotion. "My purpose has never been about revenge or proving anyone wrong. I just wanted to be heard, to tell my story through music. I want everyone to understand that every person has their own worth, no matter where they come from or how many times they've failed. We shouldn't judge someone based on prejudices or temporary mistakes." Her words, sincere and profound, left everyone present in stunned silence. The reporters remained quiet, respecting the time and space that was meant for her. Nia's mother stood behind her, gently holding her daughter's hand, her eyes glowing with pride and deep emotion. Miles, standing beside his mother, squeezed his little sister's hand, his eyes shining with pride and love as he looked up at her. Another reporter stepped forward, visibly moved, and asked another question. "If you could say one thing to all those who doubted, mocked, and criticized you, Nia, what would you say?" Nia answered softly, calmly, without hesitation. "I would tell them that I understand. Sometimes we rush to judge things we don't fully understand. But I believe everyone deserves a second chance, just as I was given a second chance. If we learn to listen more, to care more, we'll realize that everyone has a valuable story worth telling." Her words made everyone present think deeply. She was not only standing here as someone who had been hurt, but also as someone who had grown, understanding the value of empathy and understanding. Before the meeting concluded, a young female reporter stepped closer, her voice trembling with emotion. "Finally, Nia, could you share with everyone the most important lesson you've learned from this story?" Nia paused for a moment, her eyes lighting up with meaning, and then she spoke decisively, confidently, as if delivering a powerful message to all. The most important lesson I've learned is never to let the world decide who you are. Be confident in telling your story, because when you're brave enough, the world will stop and listen to you." Her words echoed in the air, soft but full of power. It wasn't just an answer, it was a message full of meaning that Naya wanted to send to all those who have ever felt small in the face of life's harsh challenges. After that day, Nia's story continued to spread, becoming an inspiration for millions around the world. The little girl who was once ridiculed and looked down upon had now become a symbol of resilience, courage, and extraordinary inner strength. From then on, whenever anyone felt like they were standing in the shadow of failure or prejudice, they would think of Nia, a small girl with an old violin but enough power to make the world stop and listen. And the story closed with a simple yet eternal truth. Never let the world decide who you are. Be confident in telling your story, because when you're brave enough, the world will stop and listen to you. Thank you for following the emotional and powerful journey of Nia Forrester, the girl who bravely overcame mockery and prejudice to prove her true worth. Nia's story is a sincere reminder that each of us has a voice, and only we have the right to decide who we truly are. What about you? Have you ever been in a similar situation as Nia, and how did you overcome it? Share your story and thoughts in the comments below so we can spread inspiration and positive motivation to everyone. If you found this video meaningful, don't forget to like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to follow more inspiring stories in the future. Goodbye and see you again.